on law and ethics. But due to my ill health, our honorable speaker, I please request our Mr. Saurav Rana, who is one of the members of the seminar committee at Law Center 2, to kindly take the lead of the program. And excuse me, any inconvenience is highly regretted.
I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Please unmute. Yes. Please give speaking rights.
Now it is unmuted, right?
Yes.
So, a very good evening today. In the Golden Jubilee celebration of Law Center 2, University of Delhi, I warmly welcome all the participants present today in this webinar. In Indian tradition, Atiti Devo Bhav. So, Mr. Brian Bloch is today our distinguished speaker, our guest today. So he's like God to us, and he would enlighten us on the topic today. Our professor in charge is not present today with us because he is engaged in some university work. So he would not be with us today. I would welcome Professor Dr. Kiran Gupta Madam, who is with us, who is the Director of Seminar Committee, Law Center 2, University of Delhi. I would welcome the other colleagues, other faculty members today, especially the organizing member of this seminar, Mr. Eklavya Anand, Mr. Pramod Tiwari, Dr. Ashwani Siwal, Dr. Nitish Saraswat, Belu Gupta ji, and other colleagues present here. So I would request Dr. Kiran Gupta Madam, Professor Dr. Kiran Gupta ji, to formally introduce our speaker today. Dr. Kiran Gupta ji. You are muted, madam. Your speaker.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now I am
audible.
I am now able to unmute myself.
Yes.
Earlier I was not able to unmute myself. A very good evening to all present here. Hare Krishna, Mr. Brian Bloch ji. Hare Krishna, Arvind Daksh Prabhu ji. We are glad that you are here in this session also. We are very happy for that. Friends, as all of you know, this is our third webinar under this international series on webinar on ethics and law, a spiritual context. Earlier, we have listened to Prabhuji Shubh Vilas ji on PQ, EQ, IQ, and SQ, and how we can make a balance between these Qs, these questions, to live a happy life. And he told us the importance of all the Qs, all the 4 Qs, that even without one of them, we cannot be happy. Then in the second session, we have listened to Prabhuji Shiv Kumar Rajgopal ji, and he told us the glories of Vedic India, how the Vedic culture, how the Vedic system is today also influencing whole of the world. Not just in one field, but in all the fields, whether it is politics, whether it is medicine, whether it is other sciences, mathematics. The origin of all the, you can say, various sciences of life which are relevant today, they originated from the Vedic culture in India. So today we are glad that we have Sirji Brian Bloch with us, who is, let me introduce Sirji Brian Bloch. He is holding postgraduate degree in conflict resolution from the USA. We call it now the alternate dispute resolution. And he is born in New York, and he has spent 21 years living in India. So he is very much part of India, part of us. He served on the Indian Supreme Court's program on mediation and conciliation. And in that capacity, he traveled to our country and he trained the judges and advocates of our country. He is a very good orator, and he has given lectures at various places in India, including the National Judicial Academy in Bhopal. And he has visited several national law school and other law schools in India and also in America, like Harvard Law School, the American Bar Association, Sloan School of Management in USA. And in India, he has visited various high courts, Supreme Courts, and national law schools and other schools. He has served as an adjunct professor at the University of Wales in UK, and he has published a number of papers in various reputed journals, and mainly on alternate dispute resolution, that is mediation, how negotiation, how we can resolve the dispute by negotiation instead of litigation. Presently, he is the ombudsman for the United States Department of the Interior in Washington, D.C., USA. We welcome you, sir, and we hope and believe, and we are, you can say, sure that your lecture will be as much mesmerizing as the lecture of our two earlier speakers were. Welcome again, sir. Now, over to Saurabh Rana.
Now I would request Brian sir to take over the floor and enlighten us on the topic today. Sir Brian Bloch.
Thank you, Saurabh. And good morning from Washington, D.C. But really, I
6 p.m.
I consider Delhi like my second home. I helped to establish the probably a number of you are familiar with the Delhi High Court Mediation Center, and probably some of my colleagues there, A.S. Chanjok and J.P. Singh, Shriram Panchu, and some others who work there. So I feel, even though we're thousands of miles away, I kind of seeing you all, I feel I'm back home in Delhi, and we're told that visas will be given on November 15th. So I hope to be back in India quite soon. So I've been given an interesting topic to talk about today, and 7 or 8 questions to cover. So I'll do that. Now, what I'd like to do, if at all possible, is keep this casual, informal, and anytime that you have a question or a comment, you could either go off of mute or put it in the chat. And periodically through the talk, I'll ask for your comments, your questions. So not going to just wait till the end and have a lecture, because it's 6 o'clock in the evening. You may be starting to get tired. So I'll try to keep it lively and interesting for you. Okay. But please let's try to make it interactive. Even if I say something that you may not agree with, happy to discuss that as well. And I feel chagrin that I'm following in the footsteps, especially of my good friend Shiv Kumar, who's a great orator and a much better person than me. But you're stuck with me for the next 2 hours. So the first point was why things go against our desire. Have you ever noticed that? that happens to all of us? And in the field of conflict resolution, we talk a lot about the different causes of conflicts, right? I mean, ultimately they come to you guys in the courts, right? But sometimes they can be settled prior to that. And one thing in especially, well, I would say not only in so many different fields, whether it's marital or whether it's job related, when there are unclear expectations, that is a major cause of conflict, right? Prior to getting married, if the husband and wife aren't clear about what are their expectations about religion, about money, about chores, about children and their education, and especially around money, right? A huge cause of, and if those aren't clarified ahead of time. Similarly, if someone takes a job and their job description is unclear, or what they're going to be rated on by their supervisor, that can cause a lot of angst. Or even someone entering into the legal profession, going to law school. They may be surprised what it's like to be fresh out of law school, especially if they don't have some connections, some family connections with a legal profession. And it's not as easy as their expectations. Well, I'm just going to walk into the courts and I'm going to easily get clients. And it's not always like that, right? We know that. So expectations are important. And in the Gita, Krishna makes expectations pretty clear. He doesn't beat around the bush. You all know this word in Sanskrit, alaya, like means like the place, like Bhojan alaya, right? The place you get food. Oshodalaya, the place you get medicine. Himalaya, the place of big mountains, etc. So Krishna calls this world Dukkalaya. I know that's not very encouraging at 6 p.m, but it's a fact. He says Dukkalayam Ashashvatam, that it's a laya, the place of unhappiness. And elsewhere he says Anityam Asukam Loka. So when we're asked this question, why things go against our desire, if we have the expectation that a lot of things are not going to go the way we want them to, it's just the nature of this world. Krishna, he stamps, he gives his imprimatur, he stamps it, Dukkalayam. So that actually can be a great relief for us. If we know going in, just like going into a new job or going into a marriage, if we know what we're in for, the ups and downs of that profession, the ups and downs of married life, it can make that experience a much more fruitful one, right? So similarly, if we go into life thinking that, not all the lights are going to turn green, not all my cases I'm going to win, my car is never going to break down, I'm never going to get in a fight with my children or my spouse. And if we understand this is what Krishna, what the Gita says is the realities, then when things go against us, we can treat them differently. We can almost treat them like, what do we call them? Barriers? In India, in America, we call them speed bumps. When they try to slow you down on a road, they put those bumps. What do we call them in India?
Speed breakers.
That's right, speed breakers. Or they could call them car breakers sometimes, because they're really high sometimes in India. But yeah, speed breakers. And so if we're expecting the speed breaker, then we can slow down, front wheels over, back wheels over, and then get on with life. So similarly, there are things that are going to happen against our desire. Because not everything is within our control. As a matter of fact, that kind of as a side note, when we talk about mediation throughout all over the world when I do trainings in mediation. I'm thinking about India, and one of the selling points, you could say, of mediation, especially to the parties, and of course this is mainly in civil court. We don't mediate criminal cases. Sometimes 498A, there can be a mediation part to that. We'll talk about 498A a little later. But in general, we're talking about civil cases. And one of the things we talk about is that the parties maintain control of the process. They decide what the outcome is. When we all know, when we go to court, we can make our best case. We can, have say all the right things. Ultimately, it's up to the judge, and we've kind of given our power over to the judge to decide, or the team of judges in Supreme Court cases and others. But in mediation, the parties maintain the control, so that's considered desirable. And when we do have control over things in our life, and we act on that, and we act in a good way, which we'll talk about a little later, that's great. But there are things that are out of our control. And the next topic is about karma, and that has to do with our karma, and also I think we've all had the experience that probably the hardest thing to do in this world is to change others. You ever have that experience? You ever try to change your child? Right? You ever try to change your parents or your spouse, or if you're living in an ashram, the other person the other person living in the ashram? It's not very easy. So sometimes that's out of our control, or how we go about it has to be intelligent, because just telling people to do something doesn't always work. So the first question, why things go against our desire? It's the very nature of the world that things are going to go against our desire. And to what extent do they go against our desire? Well, that is based on how we behave and on our karma, on how we behaved in previous lifetimes. So that's the first one, why things go against our desire. We talked about expectations. We talked about things out of our control. We touched upon karma. What are your thoughts, questions, comments, thoughts on that point? Okay, well then I guess I take silence to be agreement. All right, well, but please, at any time, you don't have to wait for me to say what are your questions. Anytime you have a comment or a thought, or even what your experience is, how do you deal with things when they go against your desire? And what have you found helpful in dealing with that? It's an important question, isn't it? Because it can be almost a daily event in our life. Practically speaking, not everything turns out the way we plan. How do you deal? Of course, a lot of you are students now, but how are you going to deal when you fight a case and you give it your best and you think you did all your great research and the case goes against you, against your client? What are you going to do? Are you going to get depressed for 5 days? Are you going to be get over the speed bump, the speed breaker? Are you going to pray to God?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah. The most convenient approach, Mr. Brian Bloch, to deal with the non-fulfillment of desires, to leave it to destiny. Maybe it was not our cup of tea. Maybe we'll get a better luck next time. But yes, it brings a lot of frustration, and it is very difficult at that point of time to deal with that frustration. But I think maybe because I am into Krishna consciousness, maybe when you knock the door of the God, you might get answer to your problems. So I believe in that fact.
Right. So leave it up to providence. Yes, that's now that doesn't mean that we didn't do our homework. We insulted the judge. we didn't even listen to our client, and then we're surprised when we lost. So we have to do our best. But then, like you're saying, Dr. Aurora, it's up to Providence, and behind Providence is our karma, is the judge's karma, our client's karma, the opposing advocate's karma. There's a lot going on.
And Mr. Bloch, it gets manifested again and again that karm kar phal ki ichha mat kar. So maybe we believe in that fact and we keep on moving. That's the only way we can keep going ahead.
Yeah, kya kare and move on. Right. What to do? Yeah. I like that, Dr. Aurora, because it's not so much what happens to us, it's how we react to what happens to us that really, what happens to us, our karma, we can't necessarily change it. I mean, there's some spiritual ways we can, and we'll talk about that later. But in general, we have our karma, but how we react to it has a lot to do with our shanti, our peace of mind in this life, and what happens in our future lives. So there's a lot going on in every choice that we have. So there's always going to be all kinds of stimuli in our life, things that happen to us daily, hour by hour sometimes. And before we react, it's good to put a pause and think about what is the intelligent way to react. And for those who are connected with the Bhagavad Gita, they try to reference that and say, okay, what would be the Krishna conscious reaction that I should make? But usually, for most of us, we don't pause. We do a knee-jerk reaction, and sometimes we create more karma, and we sometimes get upset, we get angry, we get depressed, we get all different kind of negative emotions can sometimes come out. Because, as we said so many times, and as Krishna told us in the Gita, it's not always going to work out. There was a song many years ago in America that said, "I beg your pardon, I never promised you a rose garden." And that's kind of what Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita. There's another place which is full of happiness, but here we can have happiness when we learn the art of how to react to things. Other comments, questions? Okay.
My another question, Mr. Bloch, is if Krishna himself is addressing this world as Dukhalaya, then how do we find peace and happiness here in this world without bowing to his lotus feet? How do we do that? Where to find happiness then? And what are we living for?
Okay. How about this, Dr. Aurora? Keep that in mind. And I think we're going to cover that in some of the future points. Okay. But if I don't, then you tell me.
Okay.
You chastise me. I will accept your chastisement. Okay. And let's see. Aravind Dakshamadava Prabhu says there's always an opportunity in any distress. Yes, there is always an opportunity. Just like a good business person, they know how to make money when the market is up and when the market is down, right? There's ways to do that. So similarly, a true spiritualist can know how to make advancement and come closer to God, both in when things are going really well and when things are not going so well. And a matter of fact, sometimes the real test of our sincerity, the test of our integrity is when things don't go so well. If everything was just, smooth sailing all the time, it might not give us a lot of impetus to be philosophical, to think about life. Our Guruji, when he came to America, he suffered 2 heart attacks on the boat. He didn't fly. He took a boat because that's all he could afford. He took a steamship, not even a passenger boat, but a cargo ship. And he suffered 2 heart attacks on the way. Now you could say, why did God do that to him? But the fact that he survived and he carried on his task, his mission, it's a point of glorifying him that he went through that. And he came to America with 40 rupees in his pocket. Now, 40 rupees was worth more in 1966 than it is now. Now it's, you can't get anything for 40 rupees these days, right? But you couldn't convert rupees into dollars in America. So he basically came with nothing. And look at what he did. Now, Amun Kumar says, my question is, how can we overcome when someone tries to demotivate you when you always try to do better for yourself, for the society through law? Great question. One time, my Guruji said, do not be upset. This is such a great mantra. You can think about this a lot. So maybe write this one down. It's worth that much. It's worth the price of the seminar, which I think is free. But anyway, it's worth the price. And that is, do not be upset at the agent of your karma. Right? So someone's trying to demotivate us, we say, thank you, you are delivering my karma. Very kind of you. You have an enemy in this world. They are giving us our karma. Otherwise, it would have come somehow or other. It would have come another way. So that's the mindset. That's how we can think in that situation. Now, practical things is different. One thing is to, if at all possible, don't associate with such people. Life is short, and we don't need people to just dragging us down. There's enough people who want to uplift us and bring out the best in us. And I had actually the same person who my Guruji said that to, about don't be upset at the agent of your karma. He was a professional tennis player, and now he's one of the most successful tennis teachers in the world. Almost every Marriott and Sheraton resort around the world uses his company to teach tennis. And he's also a very spiritual person. He's a very spiritual person. And when he gives corporate trainings basically on this question that Amun is asking, he says they should join another company called Complainers Limited. And just, in other words, for CEOs, don't hire people like that. We want to be in good association. There's a saying in Portuguese that says, you tell me who you associate with, I'll tell you who you are. And even in the Srimad Bhagavatam, a very great sadhu named Kamsa, he wasn't exactly a sadhu, Kamsa, but he said the same thing, that he said, association is like a touchstone, like a touchstone. What's the word? It'll come to me in a second. But you put it next to something blue and it'll look blue. A crystal. You put it next to something blue, it'll look blue. Put it next to something green, it will look green. So we are very affected by our association. So one of the uses of our intelligence is to find out good association. Just like someone coming out of law school, you want to be successful. And obviously you want to associate with someone who's successful, someone who can connect you, introduce you to other people in the profession, right? That's what we try to do. If we're an intern or something like that, we do that because they can help us succeed in our given profession. I know, my experience in the world, and especially in India, but all over the world, it's not always what you know, it's who you know. Isn't it? right? It's a little bit like that. So similarly, in any sphere of life, including spiritual life, the great use of our intelligence is to choose who we associate with. And if someone's trying to bring us down, if at all possible, Amun, when we just try not to associate with them. If that can't be done, then we take something from a mediation and we try to sit down and say, help me understand why you're so demotivating. What's behind that? And another time we could do a whole presentation on conflict resolution and things like that. But trying to, usually when people are saying that, the top of the iceberg is their position, what they say they want or need, but what's going on underneath? What's on the part of the iceberg you don't see? And sometimes having a good conversation with a person like that can come out what it's really bothering them, and maybe later have a better relationship with them. Because our experience in mediation is sometimes people are fighting before the mediation. A good mediator can bring out the best in people, and their relationship afterwards can sometimes greatly improve. I've done a lot of marital mediations, a lot of mediations in our ISKCON ashrams, and even business mediations, corporate mediations. And you'd be surprised that about 70% of the cases settle and reach a settlement. And so now that was my job when I was in India. Not my consulting was to train judges on which cases to refer to mediation. We were doing a lot of court annex mediation in those times. Vishwas says, what's your perspective of a successful life? But that question comes up at the end. How law and ethics influence us in our life, how spirituality helps us in our legal career. Well, those are a lot of great questions, Vishwas, and some of them we're going to cover later, but the middle one we could talk a little bit about. At the end of the day, we want to look in the mirror and see a person of integrity. Isn't it? We want to, if our life was going to be on India Today or Ashtak or whatever, what would we want to be on the TV that evening? That we told our client to give a bribe or something like that, or that we fabricated some evidence, or we did some trickery in one way or another. I'm familiar with a lot of things that happen, especially in the district courts. I once mediated a case where the lawyer was the lawyer for both sides. Go figure that. That was in a village. But anyway, we want to be able to look in the mirror, and we want to be able to tell our children that this is an honorable profession, and I dealt with it in an honorable way as much as possible. So being ethical, I know it's not easy sometimes, but that is important to try to live a proper life. I'll cover the other questions later. Naman says, any good career option for law students? Well, I think your professors are better at answering that than me. That would be, I've lived now in America for 10 years, and I would go to India actually 3 times a year and work with my colleagues in the mediation, but you all know that better than me. Naman, I would suggest, if at all possible, if you can take a course sometimes on ADR, on alternative dispute resolution, even if you never are a mediator per se, some of the skills that you learn can be very helpful even in your legal work. And by the way, if you can ever get connected with mediators, I noticed that a lot of the mediators in India are also very well connected. They also practice law. They're senior advocates.
Sir,
And so,
sorry, sir. We have a compulsory course on alternate dispute resolution
Acha,
and clinical
fantastic.
legal education also. Yeah.
Do you teach it?
No, I am not teaching it, but this is one of the compulsory course. Professional ethics is also a compulsory course.
That's
We
wonderful.
teach it to all the students.
All right, then.
But the
It's already done.
question in legal practice is ethics. What ethics? I have taken money for my client. Am I bound to do whatever I could to the client, or I should look how my arguing in the court in favor of my client is going to affect the society at large? Which ethic to be preferred?
That's a big question.
Towards the society or towards the person from whom I am providing services?
And Mrs. Gupta, that's not an easy answer.
Yeah.
And we have examples of this in the Mahabharata, for example. That, again, not easy.
Yeah.
So Ashwatthama was captured by Arjuna, and at first Krishna said, off with his head, and everyone was agreeing. But then Draupadi said, no, I don't want his mother to experience the same pain that I experienced when my children were killed. Right? And when Draupadi said that, Krishna changed his mind. And Arjuna said, very good. And Yudhishthira said, very good. But one person said, very bad. Anyone remember who that is? Bhima. Bhima's nothing doing. He did this, he did this, he did this, he did this. He deserves to be killed. So there's an ethical dilemma, because in one sense, both are right. There's justice and there's mercy.
Yeah.
And so what to do? What to do?
Justice and service to your client.
Yes, justice and service to your client. Yes. And
there's
then you also mentioned
clash between the two.
And you also mentioned society.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in one sense, three. Right. So what to do? In that sense, Krishna gave Arjuna the intelligence to both kill him and not kill him. You embarrass him greatly, like cutting off his hair and the jewel in his head. But you don't actually kill him. So my point is, I don't think I can give a perfect answer to that, but what you're bringing out, Mrs. Gupta, is brilliant, because it is the kind of dilemma that a good lawyer has to face in life. And the only thing I could suggest as a process is to have a conversation with colleagues that you trust and you feel are also very ethical, and you come up with a decision. Here in America, lawyers basically say, listen, I'm here to defend my client, come hell or high water, right? The famous O.J. Simpson case. Everyone knew he was guilty, but he had the best lawyers, and if the gloves don't fit, you have to acquit. That was the mantra.
The right to be defended is one of the fundamental right.
Correct.
So there has to be a lawyer for every criminal. Yeah. Even though everybody knows that he is a criminal, still, like Kasab, we know what he had done in India on 26th November. But still, a lawyer was provided to him to defend him in the court of law.
Right.
Because it is the fundamental right of the accused.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that still doesn't mean there won't be ethical challenges if we're an ethical person. If you're not ethical, then there's no challenges. We'll do whatever it takes. Now, someone wrote me a private message saying, is ethics antagonistic to self-interest and aspirations? Wow, what a great question. Because the reason I say it's a great question is, what is our self-interest and what are our aspirations? Right? It's just like I used to, as part of doing those programs in the training judges and senior advocates, I often had to go to like after the training, they'd have like a party at their bungalow or something like that in Delhi, at some judge's house. Or I remember one time at Justice Kaju's house. He was a Supreme Court judge at one time. And everyone's, sitting around sipping their tea. I don't drink tea. But they always had, it was very nice actually. They always made special Pakka vegetarian things when they knew I was coming. Of course, a lot of other people were vegetarian. But I remember, sitting there and talking to people, and they would say, oh yes, my son is at Yale University in America, and now he's graduated, and so is very successful. And so I would ask them, well, what do you mean by successful? And my Sanskrit name is Braj Bihari. And so they'd say, Braj, why are you bringing up these philosophical things? He's successful. And I'd say, well, what do you mean by successful? Well, he makes a lot of money. They had to be honest. That's what they meant by success. He has a big house in the suburbs of New York. That's their children go to the best schools. I know a lot about schools in India also, because my wife was the principal of an ICSE school for many years. But that's another story. But the question really does mean, what is self-interest and what are our aspirations? And can we be, this would be a question for our professors here. Can you be a successful lawyer and be ethical?
Yes, it is possible.
Okay. Well, there's your answer then. So it doesn't ethics do not have to be antagonistic to our self-interest and aspirations, Mrs. Gupta. You're confirming, yes?
Yeah.
Pakka. Okay, very good. So there's your answer. Another someone else said, 2 important days in life: day we are born and the day we find out why. Okay. Very good. So let us continue. And thank you for these great questions. And this is what I like. I think we get a lot more out of the give and take with questions and answers than me just speaking on and on. And I hope I don't speak too fast. Americans speak fast, and New Yorkers speak twice as fast as any other American. And everyone says, you lived in India for 21 years and you don't know Hindi fluently. And I tell them that if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. If you speak 1 language, you're American. But I can say my son was born and raised in India, and he speaks fluent Hindi. He lived in Vrindavan. He was born in Vrindavan, so he also speaks the local Brij Bas. So just the funniest story. So he married a Gujarati girl, but she was born and raised in UK. She knows no Hindi. She knows a little Gujarati, but no Hindi. So when they go to India, the shopkeepers speak to her in Hindi. He replies. Well, my son is, white like me. My wife is from Ireland, so he speaks, Pakka UP Hindi. So he replies, but they expect her to, because she looks Indian. She's Gujarati. So small little aside there. Okay, so now the law of karma and infallible justice. So there's justice in this world, in your profession, and there's justice in the universe. And there's a beautiful statement from Jesus Christ in the Bible, where he said, well, should we follow God-given laws only, or should we follow the man-made laws? And he says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the thing that are God's. Right? So he didn't say, just follow the scriptures and to hell with what's going on in the world. Right? He said, what for Caesar, because Caesar was the king. And we see in many of the ancient Sanskrit texts that, of course, the legal system, a lot of it was done by Raj Rishis, right? By kings who were trained to be rishis and trained in fairness and equity, et cetera, et cetera. But they didn't, even if they were rishis, even if they were highly spiritual people, like Maharaj Parikshit, Maharaj Yudhisthira, so many Maharaj Prithu. There's so many famous kings mentioned in Sanskrit literature, the Vedas. But they also dealt with just people stealing or people mistreating others like that. They dealt with this world. One of the great acharyas, the great teachers in our line, Parampara, his name was Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and he was a British magistrate and deciding cases all day long. Yeah. So it's not that even if someone is a very spiritual person that they just say, I'm just, the only law that I follow is the law of karma, and anything else, we can cut corners as we like. But rather, there is justice in this world. Now we know that it's flawed. Okay, I remember, and maybe some of our professors can, they've had similar experiences, but I recall this happened twice in where, a lawyer convinced their woman client to file a 498A. Okay, I assume that everyone knows what that is if you're in law school. But the thing was, it would just be total cut and paste. They wouldn't change anything. They would just change the name, Bus, and they would just write. They would just have a template. So that's totally dishonest. They just said they would just make up things about what the husband did. I mean, maybe she went through terrible things, but not the terrible things that were in that template usually. And so twice I've had cases where the lawyer forgot to change the name. And the judge just, what is this nonsense? Was very upset, because it was so clear. He was just making money off his clients, whether it was 498A or not, and then charging them for that, and then just say, oh yes, no, we'll just say that this is what happened. So there are, and obviously he got away with it many times when he was smart enough to change the name, right? So these things do happen. So justice is not infallible. I gave the example of the O.J. Simpson case. I mean, I'd say 99% of people in this country believe that he was guilty. He got off free in the criminal case. He lost in the civil case. But the criminal case has a higher level of proof beyond a reasonable doubt in this country, in America. So it is not like that. Now, the law of karma, that's a different story. There are all kinds of witnesses. The Vedas talk about the 10 directions, right? They talk about the wind as a and what to speak of God in our heart, the Paramatma. So, as one of the Beatles, John Lennon, once said, one thing you can't hide is when you're crippled inside. So the law of karma is empowered by the infallible source, and says that there are consequences for our acts. So even the Bible says, as you sow, so shall you reap. Yeah. So now, of course, the worldview of someone who believes in the law of karma is that I'm not just this body, I'm a soul, and the soul has gone through many, many births, right? Otherwise, the law of karma doesn't make sense. And so if we are adherents to that understanding, then our actions have consequences. And that means that a really wonderful way, there's nice ways to wake up in the morning. I think the best way to wake up in the morning is to think of 1, 2, or 3 things that you're grateful for. Start the day with gratitude, right? And then another thing that I've been doing lately is I try to think when I wake up, every person I come in contact with today, I'm going to try to be uplifting. I'm going to greet them with a smile. I'm going to, and if it's in a spiritual exchange, I'm going to, treat them, and I'm going to treat everyone with respect and kindness. Mm-hmm. Now, the karma you get for that is, if it's totally spiritual, then it's called akarma. It's you get spiritual benefits. But even in the realm of material life, or let's say day-to-day life, you get good karma for doing that. Of course, when we can connect it with Krishna, that's fantastic. And what about what I eat? Is there violence on my plate, or is there ahimsa on my plate? Krishna mentions ahimsa 5 times in the Gita, and he mentions shanti 7 times. Am I being honest? So we go through our life in a much more mindful way if we actually understand that there's the law of karma, and that I should I can't avoid that, even if I can avoid with a good lawyer a guilty verdict. So comments, questions, thoughts on this law of karma? Let's see. A lot of you are writing direct messages, so I won't mention your name, because I guess that's your choice. So here's a question from an advocate. My question is, justice means sometimes interest of stronger or tit for tat, etc. Because sometimes what we think justice is not a justice for others. What is your opinion about justice? What is justice? Ooh. That's people have been asking that question from the beginning of time. I think a question is, what is justice? How do you balance justice and mercy? Right? If we answer that is that you get a reaction for what you do, and then what is the view of mercy? That is a big question that would take a while to, because let me see. So you're asking such deep questions here. What is justice? I should go. I mean, if it wasn't anonymous, I would ask you, what do you think it is, since you're in this profession? But I can't do that because you sent me a private message. Let me ask anyone on this call, what do you think justice is? Now, one person wrote me, Plato's theory of justice is that it is helpful theory. Okay. Anyone that you're in the justice profession, you should be. This one should be like a piece of cake for you. What does justice mean to you? Sometimes we use the word fairness.
Saurabh, Rana, it is a question for you. Saurabh?
One time I was in the courtroom, and the advocate said, my lord, this is not fair. And the judge said, fair? What do you mean fair? If you want fair, go to some place with a Ferris wheel and a fun park. This is a court of law. This is not fair. This is a court of law. I was really surprised by that. Justice, to me, fairness is one word that comes up a lot. Neutrality and blindness of the process. And this is interesting because in the Gita, there's a very important verse about this. It goes like this, that samoham sarvabhuteshu name dveshosti na priyaha. So in this sense, justice, Krishna is saying, samoham, I'm equal to everyone. Aham means I and sama means equal, right? Samaham. And to who? Sarva means all. Bhuteshu means everyone. I'm all living entities. And he clarifies what he means by that. In the next line, he says, Name, for me, no dvesha, name dveshosti na priyaha. I'm not dear to one person and dvesh, hatred of another. So that might be a good idea of justice, that it should be so fair and so equal that like the judicial system is not playing favorites. Not because you can spend crores on an advocate and the other person can only afford someone just out of law school, that you should have totally the upper hand. Although the reality, of course, is like that sometimes. It should be fair. But then let's talk a little bit about mercy, which may not be in the justice system per se, but it does come up sometimes in mediations. Because in that same shlok, Krishna says, Ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapyaham. It says, but for someone who becomes my bhakta, the samoham goes out the window. And I have to give them my mercy, right? And so in justice, it would be great if that first two lines of that Gita shlok, if we actually had that it was fair and equal, because that is the law of karma. That Krishna is saying, I'm just equal to everyone. And then sometimes in a mediation, we can come up with win-win solutions, right? Usually in the court, it's some aspect of win-lose, right? But sometimes in mediation, we can get to people's real interests and we can find out their real interests. And I remember I did a mediation one time in India. To make a long story short, but it was a case of someone owing someone a good deal of money, and they were having trouble paying the person back, and the judge sent it to mediation, and I was one of the co-mediators. Anyway, to make a very long story short, because it was about a 3-hour mediation, it turned out that this is a little, off to the side, but it was interesting. The person was somehow in the course of the conversation, the person who was owed the money was trying to get their child into a prestigious university. And the person who owed the money, who had a friend who was the vice chancellor of that university. And they worked it out that, okay, you don't have to pay me if you can get my son into the university. And he got his son into the university. Ram Ram. Now you obviously no judge is going to work that out. But it was a win-win, and actually they're friends today, those two people. Now that was an unusual situation. But you can often, a lot of cases that I do mediations in India are partition, right? Isn't that a huge number of cases in India, right, over property? And it's often siblings fighting. People who grew up together, they were in, they went to school together, they went to each other's weddings and birthday parties and this and that, and now they're at each other's throats based on property. So yes, in a court, it'd probably be some kind of win-lose. In mediation, sometimes we try to say, well, I'll say, well, what was it like when you got along with each other? Okay, what would it take for you to be back in that kind of relationship again? And you'd be surprised at how things can come up. So justice for me is kind of multifaceted. Could you say that if they work out something without going to the judge, that they're okay with, okay, you get 40%, I get 60, or I get 40%, you get 60, you have 2 children, I only have 1, if that's okay. Is that not justice? Right? So I think we may need to broaden our, but in the courtroom, justice is so much for me about fairness and true neutrality of the judges, etc. Mrs. Gupta, do you agree?
Yes, Sarji.
Okay, all right. Someone asks, is it incumbent upon us to be people pleasers? Well, it depends on the situation. Everything, a lot of things based on desha kala patra, the time, the place, and the circumstance, right? So being friendly with people, brightening up their day, that's great. That's not necessarily a people pleaser. That's just trying to what I used to do at all the trainings. Every one of the trainings, sometimes the judges would come to my trainings twice just because of this. I would, our temple in Delhi makes these big laddus, big ones. And if there was 100 people at the training, I'd bring 150 of them because some of them wanted 2. And so that brightens up people's day in a very spiritual way. You give them some spiritual food, some prasad. And so that is that called people pleasing? No, but sometimes, and we all know this. If say, I know a lot of the students don't have children yet, but for those of us who are parents, we know we're not there always to please our children, right? Sometimes we have to correct them in their wayward ways. Even Krishna was corrected by his mother. That's a whole nother discussion. But so no, people pleasing, there's here, give me a second and I will present you as something here. Let's see. Because it's very germane to this this question that you're asking. So let me just find it. I think this is it. Let's see. Anyway, it's good to have a little break anyway, so everyone can take it easy for a second while I, okay, I found it. Okay, so basically there are 5 ways to react to any situation. Okay, and here they are. And this is basically the only 5 ways you can deal with a conflict or any decision that you have to make in life. So this, I hope you find this very edifying. We can, and none of these are good and none of these are bad. It depends on the situation. So one is sometimes we have a conflict and we avoid it. And sometimes that's good. You've probably been in a conflict with someone. You sleep on it and the next day you think, oh, it wasn't such a big deal, right? Or when my son, he took the entrance test for America in Delhi, the SATs. And when he was preparing for them, his room was really messy in our house. But my wife, who's the daughter of a general, by the way, she wanted to get on his case to clean that room. And I said, no, let's avoid it. He's studying. He wasn't such a great studier. He's actually really studying hard. Just let him be. So avoiding the conflict was good. Now you said, do we have to be people pleasers? That's kind of like this, accommodating when you give in. So The example I like to give is that sometimes I would go on pilgrimage to a place called Mayapur. It's in West Bengal, and it's a very sacred place for us for in our line of devotion. And because it's a huge, huge pilgrimage place, there's different restaurants. So I ran into someone who I hadn't seen, a devotee who I hadn't seen in 30 years. And I said, oh, let's go get some dinner together. And I was kind of hoping, I heard that there was this one place that had really good vegetarian prasad pizzas, but he really wanted to have Bengali cuisine with shukta and all those things that you get in Bengal. So I said, okay, we'll go there, because the time with him and the relationship was much more important than the than the pizza. So yes, sometimes accommodating is very good. Sometimes it's terrible. If you're a lawyer and you're always accommodating, you're not going to win too many cases. So lots of your work is going to be in this realm of competing, right? You're trying to, as Mrs. Gupta said, your job when you're hired is to win your case, right? Now, mediation is often in here somewhere between compromising and collaborating. So obviously in courts, there's no real choice, we're competing. In life, we can consider all 5 of these and think in any given situation, what would be the wisest choice? Because the further you go to this way, to the right, the more the relationship is important. And the further you go up here, the more the winning or the outcome is important, right? So if you're always competing with family members or with a spouse or something like that, it's probably not going to be a very good relationship. Sometimes in real life, we have to go between competing and accommodating, or sometimes just collaborating. And collaborating, is not, win-win, and mediations. That's not always a good thing. Sometimes a decision has to be made right away. The example that's always given in I'm sure if you've taken your ADR course, you study this, the example is given of an orange. There's one orange left in the house, and the brother wants the orange and the sister wants the orange, and they're fighting, they're having a tug of war over the orange. And the good parent comes and cuts it in half, us. Okay, that's compromise. But if they would have asked, why do you want the orange? And if the son said, I'm catching a cold, I need the vitamin C. And the daughter said, I'm baking a cake, I need the peel of the orange that you put in the cake. And they could have each gotten 100%. So that's what mediation is like. So there's my answer to the question about people pleasing. Let us move on though, and go to the next point in our discussion, which is ignorance of law no excuse? Well, let me ask you that. If you as the advocate go up to the judge and you say, my lord, my client did not know that this was a crime, what is the judge going to say? Anyone? Please, come on. You better know this answer, or else you really haven't studied much. What is the judge going to say? If you say, no, yes, it's true. He stole that money, but he didn't know that stealing was a crime. He wasn't aware of that. He thought it was just, open game. What is the judge going to say? Simran has said, ignorance of law is no excuse. Very good. A+. You are definitely going to pass the bar. Yes, it's true. So we should be aware of our country's law, right? Yes, exactly. One should know the law of the land. We need to know the law of land. Even a good citizen needs to know at least the basic. They may not need to know the difference between 300 and 299, right? One is murder, and the other one is what was it called again? I forget now. Maybe
Culpable
someone can remind
homicide
me what
not
is.
amounting to murder.
What's that?
Culpable homicide not
Yes.
amounting to murder.
That's it. Culpable. Thank you. Culpable homicide. Yes, thank you. You see, professors know the difference between 299 and 300. Yes, thank you. So there is a difference between those two. Here it's called involuntary homicide and murder. And then there's different degrees of murder. And so there will be different reactions between 299 and 300 in the IPC. So there may be nuances due to intention, right? But that doesn't mean that there's freedom from reaction. So similarly, the law of karma is the same. You may know it or you may not know it, but it's still there. It's there, and you can't. At least that's what Krishna says in the Gita very clearly. If a child puts their hand on the stove, they may know it or not know it, but they're still they're gonna burn. So it's like that. So ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Okay. And like I said, there may be, and similarly, both in your field of law and in universal law, your intention and the degree of your activity will have some say into the kind of karma you get or what the judge may decide about you, right? As we just said, the difference between 299 and 300 in the IPC. The law makes that distinction. Shiva says, why ignorance of law is no excuse? Is it possible to ensure that everyone knows the law? In other words, speaking plainly from the point of view of equity, shouldn't there be a different benchmark for people stationed differently in life? Wow. That is a wonderful question. Before I speak from maybe what do our professors think of that question?
So this is a question by one of the professors. She's one of the professors.
Oh, it's one of the professors. Oh, okay. Then they're asking me to say. Okay, thank you. Well, basic. I mean, again, not memorize. I don't think we expect every Indian citizen to have memorized the IPC. Is that right? That would be a little bit hard. Yet, certain basic tenets of human life: thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, right? Thou shalt not, covet someone else's wife. There's basic moral standards in a society that pretty much everyone should be aware of. But let me ask you this: I think in the universal law of karma, yes, it is, such things are taken into account, and when you actually knowledge brings with it responsibility. Like our parents would often tell us, you should have known better, right? They things like that. We've taught you to be a good person, and then you went out and did this, right? So increased knowledge does give increased responsibility. That doesn't mean that no knowledge has no responsibility, but like, for example, if a politician or a lawyer is caught doing something illegal, it's understood that they definitely knew better, and they went ahead and did it. And a judge may incur a greater sentence on that person. And similarly, in the law of karma, when we know something is wrong, and we may have even experienced other people getting in trouble for the same thing, and we do it anyway, that can have a greater impact. So Shiva, I really like, I know you're a very intelligent person, and so I'd love to hear your take on this. But I think it's a spectrum. It's not black and white. And to the extent that a person knows better, you could say if somebody grew up in in a very, very remote place and didn't know some things, that there may be some leniency, depending on what they did, right? But everyone on this call, for example, knows very well what is right and what is wrong. So if we mess up, we can't say, "Oh, I didn't know." So similarly, in our life and how we treat others, if we have some understanding of the law of karma and what to speak of the law of bhakti, of having, because how we want, if we want to develop our bhakti to Krishna or to Lord Ram, how we treat his parts and parcels, how we treat others, it has a lot of impact, on what he thinks of us, right? One of the in the sphere of devotion, there the not very advanced bhakta, they may be very, very devotional to the murti, to the deity, to the god, but they treat others who have devotion like not very nice, and that's considered the lowest level of devotion. Much higher is to understand that everyone else has a relationship with God, and everyone is my brother and my sister. So how I am in the eyes of God is very much dependent on how I treat people in my day-to-day lives. It's not disconnected. Spiritual life over there, my other life over here. It's very much intertwined. Okay, Shiva, are you satisfied with that answer, or do you have further points? Okay, just let us know. I saw you go off of go on video for a second there.
Thank you so much for your answer, sir. Actually, this question, whenever I'm teaching criminal law, I teach criminal law here, and it always intrigues me to see this, that how is it that we are using the same law for everybody? Because it's not, life is not in black and white. So your answer was pretty much what I was looking for. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would love to attend your criminal law class sometime. Okay, so if there's, let me see. I don't see any other. Oh, Manu says, is the distinction between mercy and justice akin to how a decision X and equity, forget my Latin, equity and good conscience is distinguished from a decision on the basis of equity alone? Well, I'm going to ask Shiva to go back on video again and answer that. I don't have to do all the work here, guys. How would you answer Manu's question, Shiva?
So I think you should go first. Your answer is what he's looking for. Maybe then I can substantiate it.
No. I'm not going to accept that. I want to hear yours first, and then I'll add to it. Do you see it?
Into how a decision is or no equity and good conscience. Sir, I really believe that these are all closely connected, but perhaps when we are giving a decision as judges, if we talk about, because we don't speak like judges speak, they are just interpreting the law, while we have the opportunity as well as the freedom to decide what should be the law. So if I just attempt to answer the question, and it says that the distinction between mercy and justice, is it similar to how a decision is equity and good conscience is distinguished from a decision on the basis of equity alone? I would say that only equity can never determine how a decision should be. And there should definitely be some space for academicians, researchers, and others who can speak from an area of research, and we can actually tell how law operates differently for different people, and accordingly the judges should give their decisions. So basically this is what I understand, but I would love to understand how you answer this question.
Well, I like your answer because you're speaking as a legal scholar and not just as a practitioner of law. And so that really, I love that. Because yes. I agree with you, and let's face it, in one thing that sometimes when I teach in law schools, I shock people a little bit. I like to shock people in the beginning. It keeps them awake, right? And I say, well, let me tell you that there's no good legal system in the world. There's only the best of the bad ones. Go like that. I mean, it's just in this world, it's hard. It's very hard to come up with a perfect justice system. And even if in theory it's very good, when it comes down to the practice, naturally, in every legal system I've ever worked with, there's going to be flaws. And of course, the biggest one I mentioned before is the kind of justice that a rich person gets and a poor person gets is just, and that's throughout the world. I'm not talking about India or America, or just everywhere. So yes, it would be great if our justice system has that leeway to take into consideration these things. And again, that is a good advertisement for mediation when it's practical. Because one thing that a mediator tries to do is level the playing field, so there isn't the power imbalance or the financial imbalance. And at least for the time of the mediation, level that playing field and create that kind of equity. But it's not perfect. And therefore, we do have the perfect system, but it's unseen. The law of karma is perfect, and the law of karma does take into consideration, like I said a few minutes ago, our intention, our what we, our knowledge, etc. And by the way, intention is really important to have good intentions, but it's necessary but not sufficient. There's a saying in English, right? The road to hell is paved by good intentions. So, and this is talking about day-to-day life. It's important to have good intentions. It's also super important to communicate good intentions to others. Otherwise, they may assume something else. So let us carry on. Is hard work the supreme factor in deciding my future? Well, that the word future is an interesting question. The only thing we're absolutely sure about our future is that everyone has to die. I mean, that's, remember he said, Dukalayam? No, it's a fact. As a matter of fact, there was a discussion once between Yudhisthira and Yamaraj. And Yamaraj asked him, what is the most amazing thing in this world? And Yudhisthira answers, the most amazing thing is people see death all around, but they don't think, oh, I'm going to die. So in one sense, that's everyone's future, but I don't think that was the gist of this question. Is hard work the supreme factor? It is certainly a factor. We should work hard. Krishna says in the Gita, karmane varikaraste. Now we should do our work, but he says, mafaleshu kadachana. He said, but we have to have the bigger picture as well. And we can work really hard, and we were just talking about the law of karma, and it may not be our karma to be this, IIT graduate, right? To get into IIT that's one of the, I think it's the hardest admissions in the entire world. The percentage of people who get into IIT, I think that's, I read that once. So our karma is there, but that doesn't mean we think, oh, I have good karma and we can just sit down and do nothing. Just wait for our good karma to manifest. No, we work hard, but in a detached way, and understanding that there's other factors at work. This is mentioned also really clearly in the Gita in the 18th chapter in the 14th verse. That says there's 5 things that cause an outcome. And one of them is our karma. And one of them is our endeavor. Right? So we do our best, and then we leave the rest, as I think it was Dr. Aurora said, up to destiny, up to providence, I think was the word she used, or up to Krishna. Right? So there's no excuse to be lazy. That is tamasic, that is a mode of ignorance. But we shouldn't just think only by my hard work alone is everything carried out. No. In the 8th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyacha. He tells Arjuna, remember me, because remember, everything's ultimately up to God, and do your duty. And his duty was yudhya. And the interesting thing is the placement of the Sanskrit, because it says mam anusmara, Krishna is saying, mam anusmara, remember me, yudhyacha. Oh, and also do your duty. So first, then second. First remember God, then do your duty. So that may be a good way. And then work really hard. You should work hard. One time, our Guruji, he was joking about who could live in the ashrama. And he said, no lazies and no crazies. He said like that. So they should be, good people, but no lazy people in the ashram. And he didn't, yeah. So now, what is the greatest? Any questions or thoughts on that point about hard work? No? Okay. I assume you all work very hard in your studies, and as professors and as devotees and as advocates. I know when I was, one time I had an appointment with Mr. Chanjok. I don't know, some of you may know him. And, a very busy person. And I said, okay, so what time should I come see you? And because this was actually it was a pro bono thing I was asking him to do. So, he was getting no pay. He said, 11 o'clock would be good. I said, oh, that's pretty early. I can try to be there. He said, no, at night. And I went into his, this huge office, and it was bustling, so many things going on at 10:30 at night. I was like, some people work really hard in this profession, isn't it? Some people work really hard. Yes, but but now, having said that, we should have a balanced life. So it's really important. I know it's not easy to do in this day and age, but a balanced life is so important. We may have our spiritual practices, and then taking care of our health, and then our relationship with loved ones, and then if we're a student, our studies or our work. And it's just like, let me see if I can find this real quickly for you. So I don't know if any of you are cooks, but tell me if you think this is a good recipe for khichdi. Good recipe? I can't hear you, but I'm assuming you're laughing, because this would be a terrible recipe. Actually, hing and turmeric are the same. Sorry about that. But could you imagine the same amount of salt as the same amount of rice? So being balanced doesn't mean necessarily giving all the same time to every activity, but it does mean, here, matter of fact, let me share my screen again. So the goal with a good khichdi is not to have the same amount of each ingredient, but to have the appropriate amount of each. A balanced life is like a good khichdi. So we can learn lessons from khichdi. One, pay attention what good khichdi tastes like. So in other words, we know when our life is in good balance. We've had that experience when we're taking care of our health, we're eating properly, we're tending to our spiritual practices, we're not burnt out, we're not like totally exhausted at the end of the day, but we're enlivened by the end of the day. And therefore we know when the khichdi has gone off, right? When it's been sitting around for 3 hours and it's starting to smell a little off. You can tell when a khichdi has gone off. So to know when our life has gone out of balance. And then we have to do something. And then if we, taste it and it needs a little salt, or next time we'll add, we'll do a little less dal. So we can experiment, add, try, but having a balanced life is very important. And the goal is that whatever we're doing at this moment in our day, we know that's what I should be doing. So I can go on about this forever, but because as you can see, I do a lot of trainings around this point. Is the best use of our time going endlessly through our Facebook scroll, feed, or our Instagram, right? I would say one of the first things we want to do in looking at a balanced life, and it's so important if you're going to be good advocates and in the law profession, which can take, you can do it 24 hours a day, if, and burn out very quickly. What was I going to say now? In this day and age, especially in the last 10 years since smartphones became part of life, is to use our electronics intelligently. Our technology makes a great servant and a terrible master. And we can do a lot of also, what do they call it? Doom scrolling. Have you ever heard of doom scrolling? When you just listen to negative news after negative news after negative news. We want to be so careful. There was a Sherlock Holmes book written in the 1800s. And probably all of you know Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. And in this one book, Dr. Holmes was totally shocked that Dr. Watson was totally shocked that Sherlock didn't know or care about the Copernican view of the world, that the Earth circles around the sun. And he said, "You didn't know this?" And he says, and Sherlock Holmes said, "I know it, and now I'm going to be very happy to forget it because it has no bearing on my life." And Sherlock Holmes compared to attic, the top part of a house. We don't always have attics in India. And he said that you want to be very careful about what you said. The mind is like an addict, and you can't just fill it with stuff, which many people do with junk. You want to be very careful what you put in there. So if we want to be happy, if we want to be peaceful, it's really important what we put in here, in our eyes, in our ears, especially. And do we really have to know what every movie star, every Bollywood star is doing, and the affair that they had with this person and that person, and everything that, India Today tells us is really important? We might want to spend less time on that. Maybe spend more time on sacred literature. I've been a student of the Bhagavad Gita for 44 years. And I probably read it 30 times. And every time I read it, there's something new I find. Right? But, of course, a lot of people don't read newspapers, but, newspaper, you read it, then the next day, you pack, use it to pack fish or something like that, it doesn't have, so being really careful about what we listen to, what we hear about, what we see, what we, because I think we know the internet and smartphones, they can gobble up so much of our discretionary time. And discretionary time is really important, especially for people in the legal profession, because you don't have a lot of it, right? Professors have to attend class, they have to write their assignments, they have to grade papers, students have to do all that homework. So discretionary time especially should be used very carefully. Very, very carefully. And one of the, I think these days, the last 10 years, this is the #1 waster of time. And even you'll see people right there, you've seen this, I'm sure you, of course, not during the pandemic, but you go to a restaurant and the husband and wife are there, or the children are there, and everyone's like this and not even talking to each other. Right. So it's very, very important. So someone wrote something about khichdi. The khichdi recipe reminds me how one of my favorite chefs once mentioned how we should be like salt, not too much, not too less, but also it's there to enhance the taste of something or somebody's life. Yes, very good. Yes. And my Guruji said the same thing, that the enjoyment in life should be like salt, not too little and not too much, just the right amount. So yes, we can. Matter of fact, someone who's spiritually minded, they can learn things from so many things. Like you can learn something from salt, right? And in the 11th book of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a person who said that he had 24 gurus, and the moon was a guru, and this and that. He even learned from a prophet. So you can learn from, the world can be full of education if we look at it through the right lens. We look at it through the right lens. Yes. Okay, let us carry on, or else Aravind Daksha Prabhu is going to be very upset with me that I didn't cover everything. And he's never going to ask me to speak again. What about the greatest welfare work? Well, I did a little research. 64,000 crores of rupees were given in private charity last year. And a quarter of it was CSR, which I'm sure probably most of you are familiar with, right? Corporates, charity. And then there was retail companies that gave charity. And of course, there was overseas. And there was also what they call HNI, or high net worth individuals. And certainly they were giving to all kinds of good causes, right? There's all kinds of important charitable organizations around the world, and certainly in India, helping the poor, helping people who have this defect or that defect from birth, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Aravind Daksha Prabhu asked me this question, and I'm sure he was getting at something with this, about what is the greatest welfare work. Well, a lot of that it goes back to I'm kind of channeling Shiva, let me pronounce her, Priyambada. She got very philosophical about the legal profession. So getting a little philosophical here, that it depends on how we see the world. What glasses are we putting on when we see the world? And if we're looking through the lens of the Gita, well, there Krishna talks really clearly how we're the Atma, we're the soul, and the body is something temporary. He says, Dehino shminyata dehe, komaram yovanam jara, tata dehantara praptir, diras tatra namuyati. That just as we go through different stages in our life, if I showed you a picture of me when I was 5 years old, you might say, well, that doesn't look like you. And I'd insist, that's definitely me. No, it's not you. You're gray hair now. You had beautiful brown hair then, and you were only 2 feet tall, and now you're almost 6 feet tall, and all these things. And I said, no, that's me. And so what is the me that has remained the same? That's who we actually are. And so when we go through many lifetimes with the goal of not getting out of the wheel of samsara and going back to our spiritual existence. So when we look through that lens, then welfare takes on an additional meaning, right? To try to uplift people spiritually, as well as taking care of their needs. We have there's a program called Midday Meals that literally feeds millions of children every day in India. But what we do is we spiritualize that by making sure that the meals are offered that are prasad, like that. So that's kind of spiritualizing philanthropy or charity or welfare work. And of course, another great way, a really important part of welfare work is giving people knowledge. Because we said, it's not that the crorpatis of the world don't suffer and don't have their mind giving them anxiety and concerns and fears and all that. It's pretty universal. So giving people knowledge by which they can deal with such things in life, that's huge welfare work, right? It's kind of like that saying. It's connected to the next question, which was, can I do good to people without spirituality? Well, I don't like the saying so much because I'm a vegetarian, but you get the idea that give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. Or you can say, give a man a loaf of a stack of chapatis, feed him for a day, and teach him how to make chapatis, feed him for a lifetime. Maybe that's a better way. But you get the idea that from a sadhu's point of view, and I'm not a sadhu, but I'm a sadhu wannabe. I'd love to become one one day. That's that vision of eternity. And so it doesn't mean that we have to degrade, make fun of people who see charity otherwise, but welfare work of giving knowledge, of giving freedom from anxiety, giving a connection with the Supreme, that is what a sadhu would see as the greatest welfare work. Okay. Yes, and Simran is saying, yes, connecting a person to Krishna, of course, that's ultimately what we mean by giving them knowledge. Yeah, because imagine if you had, in the Gita it says, Suridam Sarvabhutanam, Gyatva Shantim Richati. That if we know that Krishna or the Lord is our best friend, then Shanti. Right? That's what he says. Surit. Surit, there's different words in Sanskrit for friend. Bandhu is one. But Surit means a very intimate friend. Very, very, one who really knows your ins and outs and really cares for you. And Krishna says, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. And one who knows this, Gyatva Mam, one who, Gyatva means knowledge, one who understands this about me, Shantim Richati. They attain Shanti. They attain real peace. So the greatest welfare work is giving people real peace. Because according to their karma, they may still be living in a poor situation or living in a palace, or may have great relations with their friends or not so great relations, or may have a job that they love or a job that they don't really love. Like giving people peace. That is a rare commodity in this world. And that's one of the reasons I say on a practical level, be careful of these guys, because they don't always bring you peace. They often cause a lot more anxiety. A lot more anxiety. Yeah. Let's see if there's anything in the chat. No, about feedback form. Okay. All right, so there were a few other points. Yeah, well, the example that's given is it's an example that my Guruji would give, that a person comes home with a bird in a cage. Excuse me. We also have a change of weather. When I was living in India, and every time I get a cold or something, I go to the doctor and he'd always say the same thing: change of weather, change of weather. But it is a change of weather here now. We're going now colder. But I've never been, by the way, I've never been more cold than living in India, because sometimes in UP, and in Vrindavan, when it's 4 degrees outside, it's also 4 degrees inside sometimes. It's not so, most houses don't have central heating like they do in the West. And so like really cold. But still, I would give anything to be back in India. Yes. And I guess, it's still a few more months away till you get the fog, that heavy fog in Delhi. Oh my gosh, that was always, wow, that was really tough. Sometimes I would be driving in from Vrindavan to go to the courts, and I feel like, sometimes the driver couldn't see, 10 feet ahead. It was really scary. So the bird in the birdcage, and the story goes that the person was taking such good care of the birdcage, polishing it every day. It was sparkling clean and shining, but they forgot to feed the bird. The whole purpose of the cage is to feed the bird. And ultimately the bird died. So that's kind of tied in with this point about welfare. Nothing wrong with taking care of the cage. We have to take care, people need to be fed, or you can't really think of higher things like God or Krishna if you're wondering when the next meal's coming. So that is important. But if we're only polishing the cage and not taking care of the bird within the cage, then the whole purpose is lost. So devotees of Krishna and who they consider the welfare work is that of often a lot of it has to do with distributing the literature, the Bhagavad Gita in particular, to help people get that shanti that they really are wanting. So whose life is considered successful was the last question I was asked. Well, one way to look at it is a life of seva, a life of service. It's so interesting. It's counterintuitive that the more we're focused on our own enjoyment and looking out for number one, the more that enjoyment just is something we're grasping at, but we never ultimately get. But seva, doing things for others, actually brings is a successful life. And then when you connect that to seva in bhakti, and you're doing seva for Krishna, then that reaches its perfection, because according to the Gita, that's who we really are. In Bengali, it said, Jivera Swarupahaya Krishnera Nityadas, that the Jivera, the Jiva, who we are, the Swarup, the essence, just like the Swarup of sugar is sweet, or we're talking about salt. The swarup of salt is salty. The swarup of a chili is to be hot. And our swarup, Jivera Swarupahaya, Krishnera Nityadas, the eternal servant of Krishna. So that is my answer to whose life is considered successful when we enter into this mood of service. And that doesn't mean we don't take, and that's what, now this is connected to what I was talking about before about balance, right? Because you can't help others if you're not taking care of yourself, right? We all know, it's kind of a cliche, but we all know if you go on an airplane, they always tell you, put the mask on yourself first before you put the oxygen on your child. Because you're not going to be you're not going to be able to help that child if you're gasping for air. So similarly, self-care is really important if we actually want to have, it's not selfish to have self-care. And that means taking time. If we're spiritually minded in our spiritual practices, it may be that we chant japa on our mala, or we read a sacred book like the Bhagavad Gita, and we don't just, just like, for example, how we eat. Some of us, we eat on the run, and we're just kind of almost like shoveling food into our mouth. We're not thinking about it at all, right? But eating should be an important part. We do it 3, if not 2, 3, 4 times a day. It's really good to take the time to actually taste the food, and again, if we're Krishna bhaktas, to thank Krishna. There's a whole prayer that Krishna devotees say before they say a prayer of gratitude. It's actually a prayer of gratitude, and we can and actually taste that dosa, taste that chapati, that now it's soon getting colder, right? And my favorite was muri paratha with achar and some dahi. And that was my favorite winter thing. And so savor it. It's so we like that, and just slow down to the speed of life. And then when we are nourished spiritually, physically, emotionally, relationally, then we're so much better at giving to others. And we can really, our seva has shakti to it. So this balanced life is very important for anyone in any profession, and what to speak of a spiritualist. So Amun Kumar has a question. How can we make people understand about the law and ethics, especially in a remote area like village area? They don't give any attention to any kind of law. They don't even know the Constitution. Most of them are uneducated. Kids quit studies at their early age. What's your thoughts on this, sir? Well, it's not easy. It's not easy. It is a challenge. I am good friends with a sadhu who does tribal education in India. And also we collect funds here in America and send them to India for books for him to and it is a challenge. It is a challenge. Now I'm not sure if Pawan Kumar Mishra, are you replying to Amun's point that we should be a surrendered soul to Krishna? Why worry? Chant Hare? Or I don't know if you were referring to something else. But it is a challenge. But everyone, if you go by that shloka that I just quoted, everyone their swarup is Krishna Das, whether educated or uneducated. And you don't know, you can't judge a book by its cover. That some people with the opportunity can become very, very intelligent, very, very educated, right? So it's a challenge. But then at the same time, my Guruji used to say that man made the city, God made the country. Right now, I know village life in India is not all that, it's not always perfect, but traditionally it was such a wonderful life. Actually, it was simple living and high thinking. And people would come together. Prabhupada would tell us that when he was a child, around, the early part of the 1900s. And, he said it would be normal that people would just come around in the evenings and read the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. And they didn't have to fight traffic, the Delhi traffic. Oh my God. I'm very familiar with it. Very familiar with it. They didn't have to fight traffic. To go to work, they walked out of their house and into the fields right next door, and took care of the fields, or into the village. So we shouldn't think that. Of course, I know villages aren't what they used to always be in India. There's a lot of struggle in there, so I'm not trying to minimize that. But we wouldn't think that we're very good and they're very, ignorant.
Sir, I want to say something.
Yes, please.
We cannot equate educated person with knowledgeable person. Even
Very nice.
uneducated person are very knowledgeable. The people living in villages, they know the nature. They feel the nature, they know the nature. And their knowledge is much, much more than an educated person living in an urban area.
Thank you. And
just having few degrees does not make us educated. It is the actual practice, actual doing of the work that makes a person knowledgeable.
Thank you, Mrs.
So they know how to grow the fruits, how to grow the grains. They know how to protect the grains.
Yes.
They know the nature, and they are enjoying the nature.
Yes, I grew up in New York. I thought, until I got older, I thought milk just came from the store. I didn't know there were cows involved. Dr. Shah, you have your hand up. Did you want to say something? You're muted if you are. If you did. But anyway, I believe our time is up. Oh yes, Dr. Shah, please. Oh, you were on, now you're on mute again. Before you were off mute.
I didn't have it.
Yes, please.
So I don't have question.
You raised your hand, Dr. Mahendra? Okay, fine.
Bye-bye,
Yeah,
His hand was up.
It was
yes.
It was mistaken, man.
No problem.
No issues.
So I believe our time is up. I believe our time is up, but it's such a pleasure spending time with all of you. And I hope this was helpful and edifying.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brian Bloch, for giving us your precious, very precious time and enlightening our young minds as well as our minds as well. It was a beautiful session with you, and it was such an interactive session. I think we all were keeping on toes to bring up the questions to you and get you beautiful answers. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kiran Gupta ma'am, for being there with us and always guiding us. I extend my thanks to Arvind Lakshmadar Das Prabhuji also for organizing such a grand event, and to his team also extend my heart welcome. So I ask all the participants to join back tomorrow at 6 to 8 p.m. and we will be having our speaker next for the day. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.